Hey everybody, this is Cameron from Obnoxious and Anonymous, once again joined by Mr. Josh Eisenstadt. And
Hello.
today we got to be talking about, because it's August 28th, and 30 years ago today, Fire Walk With Me came out. Now this is the fan cut, which to me is like the only version I watch now, to be honest, because the theatrical cut, which I do, like a lot, sometimes even love. That 2 hour and 15-minute runtime, I know was something that David and Mary Sweeney probably were cursing up to the heavens while they were editing the film, because I've seen an interview, I can't remember where, but I remember maybe it was reading it or where David Lynch said, if he had been given more time, if he was given 2 hours and 30 minutes or 2 hours and 45 minutes, that the film, he would have pushed the film to that length. So it wasn't like the 2 hour and 15-minute running time was his preferred length. He literally took it up to the last second that the film could be released by New Line Cinema by the contract. So anyway, Josh, it's great to have you here. I'm so happy to have you here.
I'm glad to be here.
We have so much to talk about. So again, I first saw you or were made aware of you by you on this little documentary on the Fire Walk With Me DVD.
Right.
And I know you said flat out, you love the film, you love the mysteries, everything having to do with the film. Okay.
I do.
Okay. Now, it's been 30 years. Do you feel a little bit like me, where you're like, the longer Fire Walk With Me is, the better it is?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
When I watch it now, I watch the long version. I love Fire Walk With Me. I love the original version too. But yeah, I think, if we had the rest of the missing pieces, a 4-hour version, I'd love even more. I mean, for me, the more the merrier when it comes to pretty much anything Twin Peaks.
Now, when I saw it in the theater, I've seen a lot of people say, a lot of Twin Peaks fans didn't like it. I did like it. I'm going to be honest with you. I really liked it a lot. I didn't love it like Blue Velvet or Wild at Heart when I first came out of the theater. And it wasn't so much, this is going to sound odd, it wasn't so much anything in the film that I didn't like. It was things that I felt like were left out. And I hadn't seen the script at this point. I know some people had already had a copy of the script and read it before they even saw it in the theater.
I didn't either.
That would have made me, I think, like run out of the theater screaming if I had read the script prior, because I would have been like, oh my God, there's so much missing. And we had heard, that they had shot with so many of the actors and that they had, had to cut it back and all that. I guess I wasn't prepared for how streamlined the film was going to end up being, where it was just Laura, Donna, Bobby James, and her parents. Everybody else was left on the cutting room floor. And I do think the theatrical film works. Of course, I think it works. But I think that when you see the longer cut, even though I still have a little bit nitpicks here or there, I do think that the fuller fan cut gives you a sense of what Lynch and Bob Engels were really trying to do with the script. They weren't just, putting in crappy scenes surrounding Laura Palmer. There was a method to the madness.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, basically my thoughts on it, I remember 30 years ago today, getting out of school, meeting my two friends that I turned into Twin Peaks fans, and driving down to the theater with them and praying we were going to get let into the theater because we were way under 18. And we were. We never did get carded at the door at this one theater, and thankfully we didn't that day. And just being so excited. I remember 30 years ago today, like it was yesterday. And I remember seeing the film and absolutely loving it right away. Actually, I did love it right away. And yes, I had a couple little things, which I know you and I discussed.
We'll probably get into those.
I'm sure we'll get into that. But I love the film. And obviously I love the missing pieces, and I love the, that fan edit that we were talking about. Absolutely. It's fantastic.
Now, you went to the Missing Pieces premiere.
Yes.
So I can't even imagine you sitting there. What were you, when you were sitting there watching that, were you just like mouth open? Like, oh my God. One, you're seeing it. Two, you're seeing it on the big screen. Three, you're surrounded by everybody affiliated with it.
Oh yeah. I had Miguel Ferrer was behind me and a few seats over. Next to that was like Ray Wise was right behind me too. And then, well, David Lynch was like 6 seats in front of me. It was, yeah, pretty amazing. And I remember one kind of funny story from the premiere, the scene when Jacques Renault's talking to Teresa Banks.
Right.
And he's describing what Laura Palmer's parents look, Laura Palmer's father looks like. And he says, wavy black hair, looks like a movie star. Ray Wise was sitting like pretty much right behind me, went, ah! Really loud like that, which was quite amusing.
Yeah, obviously I praise the fan cut. And we all know that there are more scenes, even though Sabrina says there isn't. There are more scenes out there that they shot that they haven't been able to either didn't include or they have decided to sit on for another cut. Because again, Sabrina said, I think it was 2016 at the UK festival, that he was working on a new cut. I haven't heard anything since about that, but that
would be amazing. An official long cut by David Lynch would be amazing.
Absolutely.
Especially if we got more Harry Dean in there, because I know there was a lot more Harry Dean, and that's a big thing that stands out of the missing pieces from the missing pieces.
Right. So like whenever when people say, oh, I don't know, it's like if you were going to make your own fan cut, I would almost put the limitations of the 2 hour and 15-minute runtime on me, because that's what Lynch had, right? So if you were, so this is just food for thought. So if you were going to make a fan cut, your own fan cut, and you want to include some of the missing pieces into that fan cut, that means you have to take things out of the theatrical film to make room for those. I think that would be an interesting experiment as just from an editor's point of view.
I'm thinking about that now, also just from a filmmaking standpoint and everything else, an editing standpoint.
Right.
And it's a challenge because when I'm thinking of the film, the theatrical cut, everything in there is kind of necessary. I mean, to lose anything there, it's going to be a challenge. I mean, I understand why the film cut down to 2 hours and 15 minutes was cut the way it is.
Right.
With the focus on Laura Palmer, because that was the nucleus of the film.
Sure.
So I think that's why a lot of the other stuff got cut out around it.
Absolutely.
But if I have to cut out, and obviously there's so many of the missing pieces that I love, and if we have to put those back in and cut something else, what would you cut to make the film still work? I mean, it's an interesting challenge. I don't have an answer right offhand, but I'd have to think about that one.
Right. And that's you choosing which of the missing pieces you'd want to put in first.
Yeah, which is also, I mean, there's so many missing pieces that I love, like the Ed and Norma scene in the truck.
Right.
Which to me is one of the best Ed and Norma scenes in the entire thing. Obviously, the part 15 of season 3 is the final Ed and Norma scene is just amazing.
Right.
But that one and the Fire Walk Me one may be my 2 favorite Ed and Norma scenes in the whole series.
And I almost would argue that the Ed and Norma scene in the missing pieces almost needs to be in the film, because you need that contrast from two lovers who can't be together, who have to go hide in the woods to talk, and then you have Laura Palmer completely just out in the world, drugged up, and nobody's caring.
Yeah,
right. And since Lynch is such an artist of contrast, you feel it, especially when you watch the missing pieces or the fan cut.
It's beautiful. And then the other one too, Dr. Hayward and Laura Palmer and Donna. That scene is another one that I would think would definitely be in, because of that whole moment when she gets a call from Leland, and then kisses Doc Hayward goodbye, and then I am the muffin at the door, and all of that, and then the shot of just Dr. Hayward sitting there quietly and Eileen Hayward sitting there quietly, where they know there's something wrong, and it goes back to what Bobby says in the funeral. Everybody knew she was in trouble, but we didn't do anything. All you good people. It goes back to that, and I just think that moment, there's so much that's unstated, but you can feel the emotion of it. And Doc Hayward's message that Donna obviously whispered to him, you know what I mean? The angels will return. When you see the one that's meant to help you, you will weep with joy. All of that, I just think it just adds just so much emotion, and it's just a beautiful. But both of those 2 scenes stand out, just emotionally beautiful to me.
So there's a couple things with that. One is, if you're going to include that scene, you absolutely need the tagger of the red rose on the ground when James speeds away at Sparkle in 21. That's a whole punchline to that whole scene, if you will. The other thing is, I think Lynch removed it. First of all, let's just praise Warren Frost for showing up, considering that Mark Frost walked off the script writing, right?
Absolutely.
But I think the reason why Lynch cut it out is because it it one explains Laura weeping at the angel, and two, it's more mysterious to have her in the pink room scene say, "I am the muffin," like in that, because it doesn't make any sense. But when you watch that, with the whole scene in it, it makes perfect sense. And Lynch likes to sometimes take out things that explain other moments in films.
And it's true, because it explains another moment too, because in Fire Walk with Me, we have the moment after Leland says goodnight, princess, and leaves, where Laura Palmer looks up at the angel picture and she whispers, "Is it true?"
Right.
Which without that Doc Hayward scene in becomes more enigmatic. With that scene in, her saying, "Is it true?" at the angel picture now makes sense. Right. Because it's referring directly to what Dr. Hayward told her.
Now, when we talk about, what would we add in and therefore what would we take out? At the time when the film came out, one of the big consensus that was being discussed for the 5 to 10 people who saw it in the theaters was, Lynch either should have made a 2-hour film about Chet and Sam Stanley investigating Teresa Banks, or the whole film should have been Laura Palmer. So would you take anything out of Dear Meadow to make room for more Laura Palmer stuff?
Absolutely not. I love the Dear Meadow. I would definitely not. In fact, what you were talking about,
would you add more Dear Meadow in there?
Potentially, because I love that stuff. I
think the Cooper Kiefer Sutherland scene needed to be in the film.
I love that scene too. And the thing is about the Dear Meadow thing is, it's no, I absolutely would keep it in. I remember hearing some people complain about that at first, and I didn't understand why, because I really love that. And in fact, on the DVD, when I said the thing about the extra layers of mystery, a lot of that was what I was referring to with that. I think, if I recall correctly, which I think I do, is that I was referring to Chet Desmond, Philip Jeffries, and those kind of on the Blue Rose, and all these new kind of mysteries that came up in the missing pieces, which of course, and Judy and all the stuff, which actually formed the basis of season 3,
right?
Which I love too, the fact that how that was such great continuity from Fire Walk with Me to carry that into season 3.
I've always maintained that one of the main points of doing season 3, I know there's a variety of points for doing season 3, but I think one of the main points was for Frost and Lynch to redeem Fire Walk with Me in many aspects, in terms of audience reception to it. So like Frost wasn't involved, so he wanted to be able to put his stamp and integrate it into the material. Lynch always wanted to redeem this film. So by making season 3 completely off the back of Fire Walk with Me, more than the series, if you will, right? That puts Fire Walk with Me into a context. So now Fire Walk with Me is the necessary bridge you have to cross to get to season 3. And therefore, whenever, someone says, if you want to have something judge a work of art, make another work of art. So you make season 3, and that makes Fire Walk with Me now have context. And so people who were against the film or didn't like aspects of the film, now season 3 puts it into a larger context. And now everyone goes, it was a misunderstood masterpiece.
Right. Which I like hearing people. I like the fact that now the reception has changed. Now you hear, when you see articles on Fire Walk with Me, you always see, like what you said, misunderstood masterpiece. Where before, when it first came out, the reception was very cold. And I love the fact that it's been redeemed over the years. However that happened, I'm happy that it has.
There was one,
because I love the film immediately.
Yeah, there was an article that came out, I believe, out of Vacaville, California, that said that Fire Walk with Me is David Lynch's Friday the 13th. And when I read that, I had a 1-star review, and it said David Lynch's Friday the 13th. I got really excited when I read that review, because I was like, oh my God, he made a slasher movie.
Yeah. The first Friday the 13th, are they talking about?
I think they were just talking about in general.
Oh, in general. Okay.
Right.
I don't really see the comparison, but I guess I'd have to read the article.
I don't know. I just thought it was a great thing. It made me super happy when I said rated R for strong sexual violence and all that stuff. So, okay, another thing. Okay, this kind of upsets me a little bit, but I understand what people say. But Maura Kelly, okay, she had a great year in 1992, right? We're talking 2 roles in Chaplin, Cutting Edge, Fire Walk with Me, Love, Lies, and Murder, the TV movie she did with Sheryl Lee.
With Sheryl Lee, yeah.
Right. Now, when I see people online talking about how she is Donna, she is my Donna, I'm just like, yeah, but she's in the film for like 20 minutes. She's great, but you can't discount Lara Flynn Boyle for the entire series of Twin Peaks. Like that is Donna. Maura Kelly, I don't know, to me, she seems like, compared to Cheryl Lee, she seems almost like a younger sister than a contemporary in Fire Walk with Me. Whereas I felt like when Cheryl Lee and Lara Flynn Boyle were together in the Maddie Donna scenes, they seemed like contemporaries.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think she's great, but do you think that there's enough material in Fire Walk with Me for people to say she is the ultimate Donna Hayward?
Well, I don't know about that, because obviously Lara Flynn Boyle has a lot more screen time.
Right.
I mean, my thoughts on, I remember when I first saw Fire Walk with Me going back to 30 years ago today. I remember at first throwing me a little bit because I was so used to Lara Flynn Boyle, but I think by the time we got around to like the Roadhouse scene, I kind of was now accepting the new Donna.
Right.
And, with all the years and watching it, I do think Moira Kelly did a great job. I mean, I think she really did embody that kind of that innocence of Donna that you see in the pilot and really kind of season 1 Donna.
Right. No, I know. I think her performance is great, but she's not in it enough for me to say she's like.
Yeah, no, you can't really compare it because you have one that has, hours of screen time versus one that, like you said, probably has 20 minutes of screen time.
Right.
And so it is hard to say. But I do think that there's certain moments, that scene that I talked about in the Hayward house and Missing Pieces with Donna, where I think Moira Kelly has some really, really nice acting moments. And one of those is very subtle, but it goes along with what I was saying about the, everybody knew she was in trouble, but you didn't do anything. And the Doc Hayward moment, where Donna's kind of feeling, because, David Lynch, a lot of his stuff, a lot of it is acting on emotion and intuition of characters.
Right.
That's a constant, where character will tear up because they're feeling something in the air, or they'll get some kind of vibe in the air and they'll react to it, and they might not even know why. This is a very common thing in David Lynch's work. And I think that's, we have that again with Donna in that scene, because there's a moment where Laura's at the door and Donna just says to her, "Are you okay?" at the door when Laura's leaving. And there's something, I thought that Moira Kelly's just delivery on that was just spot on perfect, because there's just something in the way she does that that's kind of hard to put into words, where you get that feeling that, that the character's supposed to have in that scene.
Right.
And that so much of David Lynch's work, hits you on a gut level and you don't even know why. And it's the same way that it works with the characters. The characters are feeling things, like after Maddie's death, the characters all feel what happened. The pilot of Twin Peaks, they all feel what happened. Club Silencio and Mulholland Drive, Betty and Rita feel something, and they feel, when Rebecca Del Rio's doing Llorando, they tear up and they're feeling the sadness, and they might not even know why at the moment. Right. And it's a common Lynch thing, and I think that Moira Kelly just fell right into that. And I know it's a very subtle thing, but it's just a moment that I wanted to point out.
Yeah. I think it's safe to say that across the board, the acting in the film is incredible. And was never really, even Cheryl Lee, I mean, obviously she gets accolades right now, but like at the time, even her performance was not really noticed very much.
Which is insane. She should have been nominated for an Oscar.
I think my issue with it is not anything in the film, but I think it kind of has sort of that Oliver Stone Doors effect, which is it's too much scenes of back-to-back hysterics, and I think that you needed to pepper in some of the quieter Laura moments, like when she says to her mother in the hallway in the Missing Pieces, like, "Mom, what are you doing? You're wearing your sweater." And then Sarah says, "Oh, it's happening again," right? Which I love.
Yes, I did too.
Or like when Laura's running to go to Harold and she bumps into her mother bringing up the groceries, right? I think if there were a few of those character moments sprinkled in the film in between the you know what I mean, the hysterics of what's going on in the scenes, I think it would have shown the range that she was doing.
Do you think she would have been more likely to be nominated had that happened?
Yes.
And get more respect for her performance. Interesting.
Because I think when you start cutting those back to back, yes, it keeps you in the tone of, oh my God. But it also, I remember my grandmother watching Wild at Heart with me, and towards the end of the film, she's like, and she's referring to Lula, does this woman ever like stop crying? And I started noticing that, like once someone points it out, it's like, oh wow, Laura Dern is like crying so much in the back half of that movie.
She does. Yeah, she does quite a bit.
Right. And it's like one of my aspects of Fire Walk with Me that always gets me as a Twin Peaks fan is like Ray Wise, like okay, let me, how do I say this? So there's a author named J.B. Minton. I don't know if you ever heard of him or not, but he's written a book called The Skeleton Key. I haven't read it, but I've seen his tweets. He says that Fire Walk with Me is a sequel, not a prequel. And it got me thinking. I was like, well, I think it's a sequel in this aspect, that Lynch doesn't explain anything who these people are. You are under, he assumes you've seen the show, so we're plunged in. Whereas like a true prequel would like reintroduce you to everybody. So like Ray Wise, you know, Leland Palmer, he's possessed by Bob. If you haven't seen the series, good luck figuring that out, watching Fire Walk with Me for the first time. And I think that, you know, much like the Laura Palmer thing, I feel like Leland Palmer, I think the tragic aspect of Leland Palmer would have been more if he wasn't just, except for that one moment where he's sitting on the bed and he's like, you know, it comes to and he starts crying.
Yeah.
It's all Bob. I know there's that missing piece thing of him at the dinner table and stuff like that. But like, I just wish there was a little bit more normal Leland in the film, because I feel like if we just go by Fire Walk with Me, he should have been picked up and arrested the first day, because even people at Moe's Motors would have been like, dude, Leland Palmer was insane the other day, you know what I mean? Screaming at all of us. And I feel like if they had tempered some of that down a little bit here and there, not necessarily in what we see, but like in other scenes, and they were able to be incorporated, I think it would have balanced it out. Because as it is, he's just so vicious in this movie.
I think it goes back. I think it's a couple things. I think the first thing is, part of the reason he's so vicious and there's so much Bob is because it is, you know, it's focused on the last 7 days. And this is the point when Laura Palmer's figuring out who it is.
Right.
So I think that's part of the viciousness we're seeing. And I also think that about kind of what we had talked about before about Ben Horn, that had Ben Horn been in it, and we would have got like even the scene with Leland in Ben Horn's office that was in the script.
Right.
That we might have seen that other side of Leland a little bit more.
Right.
Because we see, you know, that you're talking about the missing pieces scene about the Norwegians. That's Leland talking about Ben Horn again. So, you know, that was kind of more his public side, you know, the lawyer and that, you know what I mean? We would have seen more of that. But mainly what we saw was his private stuff with Laura, which is where Bob, especially in those last 7 days, would come out more. So I think it has a lot to do with that.
And I also think that we needed that missing piece part of realizing that Teresa Banks was blackmailing him. It's so short, but it's so necessary.
It makes it very clear.
It does. And it really puts into context why. I also think that the missing piece of when Laura leaves her bedroom and you see Leland coming home.
Oh, I love that scene.
It's absolutely necessary,
it's
because
terrifying.
one, yeah, it's terrifying, but two, it allows you to go, okay, Leland was coming from the Great Northern, which explains why the phone call, like, and I say that because in the show,
the phone call.
so the phone call, they traced to Ben Horn's office, which is one of the reasons why they pick up Ben Horn to begin with.
That was my one complaint when I first saw the film, actually, was that phone call should have been from Leland at Ben Horn's office and not James. That was when I left the theater the first time. That was my one thing that I said on the way out was I loved it, but
I get why they made it James to make it, you know, an easier thing. However, I do think that it would have been great if she was like, James, and she's moving the phone, James, and then she hangs up, and then we just cut to Leland and Ben Horn's office, one shot. Then he knows
Leland
she's
slams the phone down or something. Yeah,
just one shot of him in the office putting the phone down, and then cutting to her coming down the stair, the back outside the window.
Right
there, you go.
And the other thing too about the missing pieces that kind of fits in too is you also have the missing piece scene earlier where Laura Palmer with the asparagus, which calls back to the pilot, of course. And then she asks, "Where's Dad?" And Sarah says, "You know, Ben asked him to stay late to help with the Norwegians."
Right.
So we also have that. So it totally ties in that, and then him coming home all ties into that. Now the other thing about the James calling too is that James calling she'd already written nervous about meeting Jay tonight in her diary previous. She wrote that before she had the asparagus dinner. So she would have written that before she went over to Bobby's. So she probably wouldn't have got a call from James if she already had plans to meet James earlier. I guess she could have.
Right.
But
and this is why I maintain that since so much of Fire Walk with Me is flipped, right? Dear Meadow is the opposite of Twin Peaks. Jesse Desmond is CD, Dale Cooper is DC, right? Laura's pictures are swapped from the house and the school from where they were in the show. At first you think, are these continuity errors? There's so many of them that you have to think they have, it's done on purpose. So I maintain, because of that scene of Laura outside her house and talking to James, and then her dad's at the top waiting, right? I think that it's flipped, that she thinks she's talking to James because of that reason, but she's really talking to her dad.
Yeah, I like that. Because that all makes sense. And James is coming over there as planned anyway.
Exactly. Now, the reason why that doesn't work in the theatrical cut is because Leland's already home.
Exactly, yeah.
But if you add in that missing piece scene of him coming home, it makes perfect sense.
Right. Which we know was the intent.
It was the intent.
That was the intent, was to have Leland coming home after that. We had two scenes in the missing pieces that make that very clear. So it definitely was the intent. But yeah, as it's time, you don't know that.
Now let me ask you this. Mike Philip Gerard is presented as like, this spirit that's gonna, tracking Bob out to get Bob, right?
Yeah.
Why is he just a loser and just gives up like so easily at the train car? Like, it's so anticlimactic because he's running through the woods, he gets there, and then he just like limps away. like shouldn't he just been sitting there outside the train car waiting for Leland to come out so he could get him?
I think there's some things that aren't made clear about the relationship between Mike and Bob.
Right.
Because I've heard a lot of people bring up, he recognizes Leland in Fire Walk with Me, but doesn't directly tell them it's Leland. And I think it goes into this whole lodge thing where there seems to be some kind of rules. Where there's certain things they can and can't do. And it could go back to the firemen and keeping the balance of it.
Right.
Maybe he, for some reason, can't directly confront Bob. Is the way I can think of that. And that he went there maybe with the intent of, maybe for some reason he couldn't do anything to Bob until he couldn't do anything to Bob after he killed Laura Palmer. He seemed desperate to get into that train car. That's the only thing I can think of. That there's some kind of lodge rules, things they can and can't do, that seems to be consistent throughout. And I also don't think that Mike is completely a force for good. I think he's exactly what he says. When he says he has one single purpose, to stop Bob, that's his purpose.
Right.
And I don't think that he necessarily cares that much about, just like we were talking about with the fireman last time, I don't think he necessarily wants to help Cooper unless it's furthering his own, his own goals.
Now, one thing that Lynch did with the continuity, made a change for continuity that I liked, was having Leland attacking Jacques outside the cabin.
Yeah, I think it works.
Because according to the show, they said Leo and Jacques fought, right?
But
and they don't know. They don't know.
Yeah, they don't know. Because with Jacques Renault, if you look at the scene, Jacques Renault, if you look at it from his point of view, he was so drugged up. He was totally messed up and drugged up. And there's also the deleted scene that's in the script, but that's not in the missing pieces, where you see Leland and Jacques fight, where he says, "Give me a little bit of that," talking about the whiskey bottle. And then Leo says the same thing, referring to, I think, either Laura or Ronette, and then Jacques punches Leo. And then he goes outside. That's in the script, but it wasn't in the missing pieces. I don't know if it was filmed, but it was in the script. So if you look so if you look at that, so that happens, and Jacques Renault goes outside. So we can assume that happened because Jacques tells them that he got in a fight with Leo and that he went outside. So we know that. So from Jacques' point of view, he's drugged up. He goes outside. He knows somebody attacks him from behind, but he's so drugged up he doesn't see Leland. When he wakes up, he's going to assume it was Leo that attacked him and hit him with a whiskey bottle.
Of course.
So it all kind of ties in. It also explains why Bob would also have a motive to kill Jacques Renault, because Bob might think that Jacques may have seen him. So by doing that, he's getting rid of potential. It also explains why Jacques is following Leo in the woods in episode 2. I mean, not Jacques, I'm sorry. Leland is following Leo in the woods in episode 2, wearing the same mask he uses when he beats up Jacoby.
Right.
Because Leo was in the cabin. He saw Leo in the cabin. He wants to know if Leo knows anything. He's following him in the woods. And that,
I remember during the second season, somebody asked Mark Frost, like, well, who hit Jacoby in Easter Park? And he was like, well, you're just going to have to assume it was Leland, okay? Because they never actually told you. But
well, they do in the season 2 finale with the scorched engine oil.
Right.
That's kind of where you get the answer when they say Jacoby, scorched engine oil, Hawk bringing Ronette Pulaski. Ronette, do you recognize the smell? It was the night Laura Palmer was killed. So that right there is telling us that smell. And also, Jacoby saying that he smelled the engine oil in the park when he was attacked. So now we know that Leland Bob smells like engine oil, and Jacoby smelled the engine oil when he was attacked. Therefore,
I like how Ronette, like after going through this traumatic ordeal, getting her IV tainted and letters on her fingernail, just goes and gets a new haircut, for the finale.
Which she keeps when she's a Meriton girl, by the way.
Exactly. Well, that was my, I know this been not, people said it's not this, but I always thought if Laura doesn't die and Leland kills Ronette, sort of like in a Mary Kelly kind of way, another character played by Heather Graham, by the way. They wouldn't be able to identify her, and therefore she'd be known as American Girl in the morgue. And I thought that was kind of a fun thing. But
that is fun, yeah.
But anyway, in the missing pieces, there's that line above the convenience store, the animal life guy, right?
The electrician, yeah.
Right. So let me just pause there for a second. Jurgen Prochnow, could they have not asked him to just grow a beard? Because that is like, I mean, look, I love David Lynch, but every once in a while he cuts corners. That is one of the worst fake looking beards I've ever seen in my life. And then when you see the Woodsman in season 3, you go, couldn't you just have asked them to just grow a beard, please? Or did he show up that day and they just said, we need a beard, quick, put him in one. And I feel bad for Jurgen Prochnow because he did Dune and Firewalk with me for Lynch. He must have thought that, like, oh man, I must be the bringer of bad luck for this guy.
And I thought I was actually surprised. Well, I mean, I guess I knew because of the cast list, but I was thinking, I was surprised that he didn't bring Jurgen Prochnow back for season 3.
Right.
With all the Woodsmen that are there.
Exactly. But anyway, going back to the animal life thing, one of the things that we talked about off camera, and I'm hoping you'll be able to talk about it here, is the scene, since we're talking about the Jacques and Leo in the cabin and Fire Walk with Me. Talk about the Leo Johnson's part that Lynch wanted to shoot, but Eric DeRay himself said, I don't want to do that. Yeah,
it was the scene in Jacques Renault's cabin. He was supposed to, because you know how it was made clear in the show that Laura Palmer had sex with, Leo and Jacques in the cabin. Right. So we were going to see some of that with Leo, where he was going to basically mount her and have hair on his back and kind of be like a wild animal was his direction. And he did not want to do that.
But they were going to put hair implants, right?
Yeah, on his back, yes.
So they were going to make him sort of like a wildebeest or something.
Yeah, and he said he said something like, you're going to be like an animal.
That's
Eric DeRay did not want to do that.
See, there's so many things like this where I'm like, and of course the Twin Peaks fan of me watching this whole ending is like, why don't they let Waldo out of the cage? Where
the bite the bullet baby? Yeah.
You're right. You're expecting to see like all of that. It's sometimes hard being a Twin Peaks fan.
See, that's in the script too. The bite the bullet baby is in the script, but in the script it doesn't have Waldo landing on her shoulder.
Right.
Which would have been nice if that was filmed. I wonder if he did film Waldo getting out of the cage, because it would have been interesting. Waldo, doing the pecking and saying her name all the time on the shoulder, and then the bite the bullet, and them taking, and then also Jacques taking the photograph that we see of Waldo on her shoulder that they find in episode 6 in the series.
Right.
Well, I find it. Yeah.
I'm almost thinking that Mary Sweeney and him are like watching the time of like the edit, going. But again, we don't even get that in the missing pieces.
But then again, I mean, if you're looking at the film as its own thing, it's not necessary for the film to tell its story. It's just something that people like us would enjoy,
Well, the thing is, though, I feel like because it ties into the overall mystery that Cooper is going to be, solving, you kind of want to make sure those things happen.
Yeah, the animal attack is definitely a significant part of season 1 that is investigated, Going to Lidecker's bed and finding out about Waldo and finding Waldo and shooting Waldo and all this stuff is definitely a significant plot point in the investigation.
It absolutely is. So they didn't do the Leo back thing. We all know about the pig scene they didn't do.
Yeah,
or they
Cheryl didn't. Yeah, with it.
I don't know if they shot it like any test shots for or whatever. But when you see the missing piece, especially like the above the convenience store scene, it's so great in the longer form.
Oh yeah, I love it.
And I just think to myself, you remove some of the best shots of the whole movie, or Laura looking at the fan and that smile,
Oh yeah.
right? There's things like that if they had made it into the theatrical cut, I do not think you get the critical lambasting that happens.
Maybe not. I don't know. I don't know.
I just think that there are things, and the thing is that Lynch is so big into the Cannes Film Festival that he was let's make it to Cannes. Let's make it to Cannes. I think if the Cannes Film Festival had been in August, I think if he had a little bit more time to like sit with the material, like he even said himself again in an interview, saying that he would have included different things in the film if he had more time to think about it.
Right.
That's intriguing to me because it makes me feel like, because Blue Velvet, I don't feel like he'd touch a frame. Wild at Heart, I don't think he would touch a frame.
Now, I got an interesting story about Blue Velvet that I got from Dwayne Dunham.
Okay, go for it.
And I know we're talking about Firewalk with, so I'll do this one quick, but it's interesting. So Blue Velvet, coming right after Dune.
Right.
This is when I was working with Dwayne Dunham. We would every time we'd go to lunch, would be open season on David Lynch questions.
Right.
So I'm talking to him one time and I asked him about Blue Velvet, and this is coming off Dune. So David Lynch essentially was told on Blue Velvet, at first he wasn't going to final cut. He said, I don't want to do it if I don't have a final cut. So De Laurentiis says, okay. David says, what if I cut my salary in half and cut the budget in half and I get final cut? And De Laurentiis said, okay, but the only rule is it has to be under 2 hours.
And it couldn't be in the contract.
Yeah. So what Dwayne told me, he said they ended up cutting it. I think the reason the end credits are so quick is to keep it under 2 hours. And basically, I think they got like 5 frames under 2 hours, I believe is what Dwayne had said. So they just made it, cut it 5 frames under.
Those end credits are so fast that when you watch them on pan and scan, it's like,
it's like this. And that's why. But I think that final cut of Blue Velvet is perfect how it is, and I don't think he would change it, even if he could put more time in now. Though Dwayne said when he did the first edit, which was, over 3 hours, like 3.5 hours, that David Lynch watched the whole edit and said, Dwayne, there's a problem. The problem is I like it just how it is.
Right.
Meaning,
But you look at Blue Velvet and you look at how much was cut out. And what's so great about Blue Velvet is you don't feel like any of that is missing.
No, not at all.
It's so well cut together.
Not at all. It's cut beautifully. But I love the deleted scenes too, but you don't feel their absence.
Yeah, but if you put in that scene of Jeffrey at college watching that assault, nobody's on his side for the whole movie.
No, that changes everything. Yeah.
Absolutely. Or even him having the third girlfriend at school changes everything. Right? I mean, people get mad when he's cheating on Laura Dern, right? Imagine if he's cheating on 2 other women with Isabella Rossellini, right?
Exactly. Now you got even a bigger problem. Yeah, exactly. It definitely makes Jeffrey a lot less likable having those two scenes in there. And also, other scenes like the one that David Lynch really likes, the one that he puts first on the deleted scene Blue Velvet, and deleted scenes of Blue Velvet, the one with the in the bar under Ben's apartment. Like that's a great scene on its own. But I think I've heard David Lynch say in interviews that to put that in the film would have taken away from the power of Ben's apartment, and he probably is right.
Right.
I think Blue Velvet is pretty perfect how it's cut. So that's one of those instances where it all just worked out.
Exactly. So it's safe to say that we love like everything that's in Firewalk with Me. Is there anything in the film that you don't like?
No, I don't think there is.
Yeah.
I don't think there is.
I mean, there's some peculiar things like it's like, again, these aren't things that I dislike. But
I mean, my little nitpicks that I mentioned earlier, but that's kind of it,
Right. It's just, it's like, I have little nitpicks that like, they're so small though. Right. It's most major. Right. It's just, like it's just so random to have her just go to school, and then like the next shot is like her showing up with a towel, with James. It's so abrupt that you're like, what is going on? And is she sneaking away from PE class? What is happening here?
PE class. Because there's the little line that's also in the script where when James says Laura when they're on the staircase, in the script there's another line where she says to meet her in the custodian area after PE.
Right.
So
I can pretty much figure it out, but it's like it's just so randomly, like just like all of a sudden she's in a towel.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, it's like if you added a missing piece scene, you got to figure out what you're going to take out. It's like I think the Jacoby scene is important. I think you need that.
Yeah, the Jacoby scene's great.
I think that that's an important thing.
Her disgust with him. It's interesting because you know how Jacoby felt about her, but in that scene we learn how she felt about him.
Exactly. And I mean, now we know that, you know, from some of the Annie stuff and a few other things peppered in, I think that comes from Bob Engels remembering working on the series. But, you know, I remember at the time hearing that David Lynch primarily just watched the pilot. And that was something we talked about before, was that David Lynch considers the pilot to be like the thing of Twin Peaks.
Yes, he does.
So from what I understand, he watched the pilot and then based the script off the pilot, and then let Bob Engels come in to kind of bring in some of the other mythology in there that they wanted to incorporate. So when James tells Donna in the pilot, Donna says, "No, I knew her better than she thought I did." Okay, so that's going to open up the whole pink room scene, right?
Yeah.
James saying to Donna, "She told me Bobby killed a guy." All right, so that's going to open up that.
Yeah.
Now, when I first saw the series, I thought James confused Bobby for Bob.
That's what I thought too.
Right. Okay. So we have this whole scene of now Laura and Bobby shooting this police officer.
And then when the diary came out, I thought that it could be a reference to in the diary, the guy that Bobby shoots in Laura Palmer's diary when they're in Lowtown running from the drug dealers.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I thought it was about that after that point. But
right.
Then Firewalking makes it clear that it's a reference to Deputy Cliff.
Right. So there's things in the pilot that it's kind of like, you know, little things here like that open up bigger stuff for the movie. But it kind of gets them into trouble because in the next episode, in episode 1, that is when Josie says, "Oh, Laura came over that day before she died and tutored me in English." Because they didn't watch episode 1. They didn't put that in even into the script that she went to go see Josie. So
it would have been quite interesting to see that. Because we also have the line that Josie says that Laura Palmer said to her, "I think now I understand how you feel about your husband's death."
Exactly.
So it would have been interesting to see the context of that line. And also from Laura Palmer's diary, it seems like there was a little bit more going on with Laura and Josie. So it would have been interesting to have seen that dynamic. I mean, that would have been fantastic.
I think that would have been one of the best scenes in the whole film if they had written it, because you would have had Laura, who's now basically kind of given up on life and being able to see past Josie's veneer and be like, "I know who you are," or something like that, and have Josie just like petrified.
Yeah.
Right?
And then I think now you understand how you feel about your husband's death line could take on a whole new meaning.
Exactly.
If it's her kind of reading what Josie's done.
And if Josie feels like, "Oh my God, am I like kind of exposing myself to who I am?" And then all of a sudden Cooper comes to town, that would put motivation behind her plugging Cooper.
Absolutely.
Because she's already like wound up.
Yeah, it makes the motivation even stronger.
Exactly.
Because we don't know what else Laura said, because the only one that would have been alive that knew about that was Josie. So she could have said even more that we don't know about that could have scared Josie even more. Where Josie actually could have been relieved when she found out what happened to Laura Palmer, because Laura might have been onto her.
Exactly. This is what I'm talking about.
Right? A whole new element to the opening shot of Josie looking in the mirror, which is, not that many hours after she saw Laura.
I tip my hat off to you, sir. That is brilliant. And
this is quite interesting, isn't it?
Wow. Yes. But
because they can't go back in time and convince them to put that in the film.
Well, this is what I'm talking about. When I read in the Film Threat magazine that they gave the script, I don't believe this for 1 second. They said they gave the script to Twin Peaks fans and non-fans to make sure that they all understood the film by the script. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
So a real Twin Peaks fan would have been like, "Well, what about X, Y, and Z?"
Right.
Right. So I don't believe for 1 second they did. Although, for whatever reason, a year before the film came out, they gave the entire script to the TV Guide. And the TV Guide, you'll remember this, right? They printed up a whole page. This is how I found out there was even a movie being made. And they talk about threesomes with Ronette and Teresa and Laura. I was like, what? And they talked about David Bowie as a time-traveling FBI agent.
I remember that.
I'm like, what is this movie going to be about? And they're like, there's no Audrey Horne. Maura Kelly's playing the new Donna. I was like, this sounds insane. And I remember they said the new Twin Peaks promises heaps of shrieks. That was their little tagline. And I'm thinking to myself, going, wow, compare that to season 3, where we still haven't even seen the script.
Yeah, exactly.
But they're giving it to Film Threat and TV Guide and all these places. So
wow.
Because there was no internet really, right? So they're not worried about the script leaking.
Right. I think that's part of the reason why for the secrecy on season 3, because I mean, we saw what happened even with the final scene of season 3, where those photos leaked all over the place. I mean, if that script got out anywhere.
You mean live stream?
Live stream and well, I never saw the live stream. I only saw the photos, but yes,
we are.
I didn't want to look at too much.
The full night was live streamed on Twitter.
Okay, I never saw that. I only saw the photos, but that's even worse. But I wanted to bring up a couple interesting things about Fire Walk with Me that may or may not be known. That I think people will find quite intriguing. I mean, I think some people know this, but I don't think it's known far and wide. The first thing is you were talking about the convenience store earlier. And how much that we both love the missing pieces version of the convenience store scene. Right. Well, what if I tell you there's even more?
Oh, I'm sure there is.
Because I knew Frances Bay very well, and I talked to her in length about it. She had a number of lines that she said backwards in that scene that were filmed, including the lines that are in the script, the why not be composed of materials and combinations of atoms. That line was filmed. Jürgen Prochnow, I saw an interview with him where he talked about filming lines. So there is so much stuff. And Michael J. Anderson said that they put the camera down everybody's throat in that convenience store, like they did,
Wow.
So, I mean, there is so much stuff.
Yeah.
And that they had a pig fetus in the convenience store scene at one point. That's what Michael J. Anderson said a long time ago. So, I mean, there's so much more even that if David Lynch does do a new cut, I wonder if he will incorporate any of that other stuff. I mean, it would be, and that was the first thing. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, but then I'll tell you the second thing later.
Well, I think that if he does do a new cut, as much as I love this fan cut, okay, I don't want the fan cut with David Lynch's stamp of approval on it. Right. I want him to go crazy, like during the Laura and James scene. Put Cooper there. Just put him in the film.
Right. Yeah. Put him in the
Just mix it all up. Go crazy. Please find the red rose shot when James speeds away.
Yeah.
Because if you look, the true filmmakers out there will notice when he speeds away, the camera starts to move as he peels away because it's panning down to the shot of the rose.
Yep. And I think he just didn't include it because it was such a quick shot. He probably decided not to include any missing pieces for that reason. But I wish he would have. It would be amazing to have seen that. Right.
And I think holding that shot, I think was a way for Lynch to be like, you can't make the true fan cut because I'm going to be able to incorporate that. All right. So what's the next thing about Fire Walk with Me? Because I think we're going to get into some really interesting material.
Okay. Here's the next thing. Now, this is something that I think some people know, and this is the Teresa Banks murder, which I remember when Fire Walk with Me came out, I personally was very interested about how Teresa Banks fit in. I became kind of fascinated with that throughout the series. How does Teresa Banks fit into this? So I was very excited that we were going to get all of that.
Right.
And there's still a lot of mysteries around this. And here's a couple things. The Teresa Banks murder scene. Now, if you look at that scene, number one, I can tell you for a fact that scene was inside the Chalfont trailer. It was not in her trailer. It was not in the motel. She was murdered inside the Chalfont trailer, the same one that had the mound of dirt.
And not Deputy Cliff's trailer.
No. Okay. Chalfont trailer. I have it right from the call sheet. Tremont Chalfont trailer. It's in the and that's why the mound of dirt is under there, just like it was in the train car. It's under the trailer with the ring. So there's a couple of things about this that are quite interesting. Number one, how did Teresa Banks get in that trailer? Also, when you look at the scene, her legs are tied and her hands are tied together. It's very hard to see, but when you look at it closely, they are. So, and also we hear the sound of the arm coming from the TV. We know that the lodge spirits travel through electricity. So the question is the arm, who's obviously connected a part of Mike, coming through that TV set, and that's why it's smashed? Is that why we hear the sound of the arm coming from the TV?
So it's sort of like Bob telling them to shut up?
Yeah, essentially. I'm wondering about that because we hear the whoo.
Right.
That's the arm sound, that sound coming through the TV. And that's what the arm says, I sound like this. So that's his sound, which is connected to Mike, and then Leland smashes the TV. Now, Teresa Banks is tied up in the Chalfont trailer. So how did this occur? At that point, Teresa was blackmailing Leland. So what are the circumstances of, did the Tremond Chalfonts appear and lure Teresa into the trailer and then somehow got her tied up, maybe thinking there was somebody coming in and that allowing Leland to come in with his pipe? I mean, how did this play out?
This is what I'm talking about. This is why I'm convinced that the Tremonds are the ones who killed Harold Smith. I don't think he killed himself. I don't, because because the place is trashed. And I know that, like, oh, he doesn't want them to read Laura's diary and all that stuff. I don't believe it. I think he trashed it to keep the Black Lodge from getting the material.
Right. Because we know he was aware of Bob.
He was.
And he didn't believe Bob was real, but when Laura Palmer grabs him and her face turns white, maybe he became convinced at that moment.
And she shows the Garmonbozia teeth.
Yeah. Maybe at that moment he became convinced this Black Lodge stuff, Bob is real, you know?
So, okay, a couple of questions real quick, just on tailgating off that. How is Laura getting possessed at that moment? Is she have a part of Bob in her already, or what's going on?
Here's what I think about that. I think that in the world of Twin Peaks, that a Bob possession, that basically you have to fully let Bob in, but I think there's a bit of Laura that every time she did something bad and became darker, that she allowed more of that Bob energy inside of her.
Okay.
So I think that she would, when she says in the diary, you know, in episode 16, when Donna gets from the real Mrs. Tremond the extra pages of the diary, and she reads, you know, I know I have to. She's saying she has to die. She says, I know I have to because it's the only way to keep Bob away from me. The only way to tear him out from inside.
Right.
Suggesting that there's a part of Bob that she allowed into her. Every time she went out and did something bad to somebody, that was more of Bob taking control, getting inside of her more. If we look at Bob as a metaphor of the evil that men do, it makes sense that she's allowing more of this evil inside of her. So at that moment, she lets the feeling of Bob come over her. In the train car, we see Leland puts the mirror under Laura Palmer and she sees herself become Bob. So there's, on the fan scene and the missing pieces, there's a little bit of Bob that Laura Palmer's allowed into her life by accepting certain things that she's done, by doing certain dark things. So I think that that's what's going on there. She's not fully possessed, but she's allowed a little bit of that Bob energy inside of her. That'd be the way that I read it.
The next thing is, why do the Tremonds have the Chalfont? Why are there two different names? Like, what was the whole? Because it seems very convoluted.
Here's my thought on that.
Okay.
So if we look what Carl Rod, Harry Dean Stanton's character, says, that Chalfont was the name of the people that rented the space before, two Chalfonts. And then we look at what happened with Donna, where there's the old woman and the grandson. And then when Donna comes back, it's a middle-aged woman who says, I'm Mrs. Tremond. She had no children. Her mother passed away, all of that. So what seems to happen is that the old woman and the grandson, they come in and they take over somebody else. Those people disappear and they replace them, taking their names. And the people that disappear don't know where they went until they're returned. So that's what seems to be happening, is that they temporarily replace people. The two people named Chalfont, that's why Carl Rod thought, okay, new people called Chalfont. The old woman, the grandson moved in. Their name is Chalfont too. Weird, huh? In reality, the two original Chalfonts, or whoever lived there before with the name Chalfont, disappeared. They took their name and took their place. They did the same thing with the middle-aged Mrs. Tremond that we see in episode 16 of Twin Peaks. So that's where I think the names come from. And the Alice Tremond thing is a whole other story to get into that one then. From there.
Well, let's concentrate on Firewalk Me for right now.
Okay.
So one thing I noticed rewatching some of the Deer Meadow stuff today is I love when they're in the trailer and Chris Isaac's looking at Teresa Banks' picture with the ring, and it seems like he's like becoming more and more hypnotized.
Yes.
You know, like it's not so much a Cooper, you know, trying to, you know, get a feeling with with Laura Palmer and like, you know, trying to understand the space between them as the killer. It seems like Chris Isaac's just kind of like turning his head, and he just seems like keeps cutting back and he keeps staring at the picture.
Yeah. And then it gets closer on the picture and him moving up the picture to her eyes and everything. Yeah.
Right. And I'm thinking, is that sort of like the lodge, like kind of bringing him closer because they need to get rid of this guy, right?
Yeah.
And they know he's a threat. And by getting rid of him and then Cooper coming to town, then they know, okay, now there's a bigger threat, but also we can utilize Cooper as well. Because if we take over him, then we can really have lay of the land.
Yeah, I think there was a big definite plan to get the Mr. C out in the world. And that's what I think Cooper was being used for. And I think, Chet Desmon, they did need to get rid of him. And I do think that there is a bit of lodge hypnosis. And I do think that both Cooper and Chet Desmond, with their Blue Rose cases that we know about, Laura Palmer and Teresa Banks, that I do think that maybe it was through hypnosis or something, but I do think they both got a certain obsession with the victim. And that was Chet almost becoming hypnotized or obsessed with this Teresa Banks case at that moment when he's staring at her face. And I do think that there is a bit of that going on. Then we see the curious woman walk in, who is clearly some kind of lodge being because of the cut to the electricity pole right afterwards.
And the soot.
Not to mention, yeah, Carl's response. Sorry, what was that?
The soot on her face.
Yeah, very woodsman-like, exactly.
Absolutely.
And then she goes through the electricity pole, or it's suggested she goes through that number 6 electricity pole. And it also prompts Carl Rod's line, "I've already gone places." And he definitely reacts to her like he knows that she's not from here. And that comes right after Chet Desmon looking at the picture. So I do think that you're onto something with that idea of him being hypnotized by the lodge.
And you've just completed this whole thing for me because, you know, I felt like Harry Dean Stanton saying that line is sort of a Lynchian, it kind of comes out of nowhere, but it's very haunting and mysterious. And then Mark Frost took that concept and blew that up in the whole secret history of Twin Peaks.
Exactly.
But the way you just presented it to me, like I just thought that person coming into the trailer was sort of a non-sexist, you know, sequitur. But yeah, it is very woodsman-like, and that really makes it like seem even more appealing that character would even show up.
Exactly, and it's interesting too the way that Mark Frost connected the that to the idea to the log lady and Major Briggs's disappearance,
right?
In the secret history, where he kind of, which is again kind of what you were saying about, you know, Mark Frost, who was not involved in Firewalk, and me kind of taking that and, you know, putting it into his work in the book. Yeah.
All right. Do you have any other Firewalk with Me cool things that you are aware of? I'm sure you got a ton of them.
I do have a lot. Yeah, I have quite a few, but those were two I definitely wanted to touch on. The Teresa Banks thing is one that's particularly interesting to me. Also, you know, the question of how did Teresa get the ring? I mean, and I think that Teresa had more connection with the Chalfont old woman and grandson than we know.
Well, they lived pretty much next door to each other.
Yeah, just about 4 trailers away, very close.
Right.
So I would say, I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say that they probably had a connection to her, seeing her go to work, you know, come back, that type of thing.
Yeah, and they might have, you know, the same way Laura Palmer had the same connection to them with delivering meals to them for the Meals on Wheels. So it seems like they were intentionally putting themselves there. Now, as to how she got the ring, I would say that would have had to have come from them, would be my guess. That she would have received that ring from the Chalfonts. And then the night of her death, she would have been lured into that trailer by them, which would suggest they're directly working with Bob, which would also suggest that Bob would 100% also be aware of Harold Smith. We see Pierre Tremond point at Bob and say, "Fellow victim," which almost seems like he's giving Bob an order.
Right. But Leland never pays. Well, who knows? Maybe he did go to see Harold Smith that night. I don't know. But
yeah, we don't know.
Yeah.
But if it was Bob, but I like the theory better that the Tremonds did it. To me, that's and with the whole thing you had said, I don't know if you said it on here, but the whole idea that maybe they pulled like the old couple in Mulholland Drive coming under the door sort of thing is an eerie thought. Yeah, I
don't think they killed him and then strung him up there. I think that he killed himself to get away from whatever impending doom was coming.
That's very much like Mulholland Drive. Then it's very much like the couple coming under the door and chasing Diane, and then she shoots herself.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So let's run through just a couple more of the Firewalk with Me stories, and what else you got for us? Because this is juicy material here.
Okay. Well, what kind? Give me any subject or an area that you want to hear about.
Oh my goodness. Well, okay. Things we haven't heard before. How about that?
Okay. Okay. I went about the ring. Okay. Okay. So let's go in the going back to the Deer Meadow sequence.
Right.
Let's go to the bit in Hap's Diner.
Okay.
And the idea that a lot of people have talked about Deer Meadow being kind of a reverse of Twin Peaks.
Right.
So we have Hap's Diner, the electricity in the background, the lamp.
Right.
Now, you know that after the fight scene in the script, which I'm sure most people I know have read the script. It's been out away forever. Right. We have the bit about when Sam Stanley says to Chet Desmond, one thing that's been troubling me, the Blue Rose.
Right.
Are you going back to the trailer park for the Blue Rose? In the script, he asked him about the lamp at Hap's Diner, and if that was for aesthetic reasons, if Chet believed that was for aesthetic reasons. So I think that there was some attention being drawn to that. And of course, Fire Walk Me really brings in the idea of the electricity being connected to the lodge, which plays big time in season 3.
Of course.
Particularly the final scene, of course.
Well, also when Mr. C walks in before he walks up the stairs, right? There's that guy welding or making something with electricity.
Yeah, and that's actually he's sitting in a spot that's supposed to be, I think, the area that we see, because we see that same kind of weird thing that he puts his hand behind that we see in Fire Walk With Me that Jürgen Prochnow is sitting by, and the second woodsman, played by David Brisbane, is sitting next to him. So I think it's supposed to be, even though the wallpaper is different, the wallpaper now matches Mrs. Tremont's picture, but it is similar to that. And another thing I'll bring up too, actually it's not really that relevant, not that interesting, but I'll bring it up anyway. The continuity of the town of Twin Peaks, when we see Laura Palmer running home in Fire Walk With Me after she gets the picture from the Tremonds.
Right.
We see her run to get to her house, towards the train tracks away from the Double R.
Right.
In season 3, in part 18, we see Cooper and Terry Page drive the same direction.
Right.
To get to Laura Palmer's house. So that's interesting continuity between the two that's there. And there's this other movie called Queen of Hearts where I believe somebody walks the same way. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
Yeah, I'm still trying to digest that.
Good continuity on that one.
Thank you. Now let's talk about, let's say, the final scene, which is a great scene. I love that scene. It's very, my local newspaper, though, when it came out, said the final scene was David Lynch laughing at us for paying money to see this movie. But
I don't agree with that at all. But
I know. I just thought that was an amusing thing to read.
Yes.
But you have an amazing theory that I've never heard anybody say, which is that your feeling is the ending of Fire Walk With Me is not what happens after Laura Palmer is dead in just Fire Walk With Me. You believe that ending is the finale past season 3.
Yes.
That somehow Cooper is in the lodge again or whatever, and Laura Palmer is older, and that explains her hair being, all made up.
I do. I believe that is, and her hair is curlier. It's more, Carrie Page-esque, but longer.
Right. Well, that's because Audrey Horne's stuck in there doing the hairdressing.
Right, of course. Audrey did open up that salon after all.
Right. Well, what a worse fate to be stuck in the Black Lodge doing Laura Palmer's hair every day.
We're going to cut it short today.
Exactly.
You haven't seen Cooper in 25 years. You're going to appear today and remove your face. We got to give you a short haircut.
Right.
Okay.
Right. One of the things when just jumping real quick to season 3, when Cooper says, we're going home, I don't believe for 1 second he's taking her back to the Palmer house because Bob's in Leland still, blah, blah, blah. I think he's going to take her back to the Fireman's.
I agree, because we see that shot.
Created.
Yeah, he's going to take her to the Fireman's because we see the shot of the entrance to the Fireman's.
Right.
Or the White Lodge, as it likely is. So I think that he was going to take her. I think he was going to take her home, but not in that timeline. I think he was going to take her to the Fireman's, use the Fireman's place to go forward to when Judy is in Sarah Palmer, and then take her there.
Okay. Now, do you believe that the giant is not even in the Fire Walk With Me script because he was in the Addams Family? Is that the reason why he wasn't even in the film?
Not that I've never heard about that. I don't think that's the reason, because I don't think they shot at the same time. I think they just didn't write him into it.
How bizarre is that?
Yeah, I was surprised.
He's the first person in season 3.
Yeah. I guess, but thinking about it now, where would he have really fit in Fire Walk With Me? I guess he could have been.
I don't know. And the ideas they came up with for season 3, I think, because the ending of season 2 definitely hints that there's a connection there between.
Well, it's the atomic bomb. If we had the atomic bomb.
Okay, if we had the atomic bomb open up Fire Walk With Me,
then the firemen would have had to have been there.
And the movie would have gotten critical acclaim. There's nobody that would have seen that sequence in 1992 and been like, well, it's just another night at the movies.
But would it have played out the way it did in part 8 back then would be the question.
No, they don't have the effects for that. But
and they wouldn't have had would they have taken, the amount of time with it? that's taken
No.
in part.
Not with a 2 hour and 15-minute runtime.
Right.
But still,
Then we would have
just an
lost
atomic bomb. Well, I'm just saying, the atomic bombs, kicking off is a
It would
great
be
way to
pretty
start the movie.
Oh yeah. And then if we would have the frog moth on top of that, I mean, wow.
Oh my goodness, it would have been
1982. People's heads would have exploded on that one.
Well, that's the thing. When you look at season 3 and you look back at Fire Walk with Me, it's like it almost plays like an after school special compared to some of the stuff you see in season 3, because it is because it is straightforward for the most part, except for the Annie showing up in the bed. And I wish that the missing pieces, like if this movie had come out today, the whole scene of Annie in the hospital at the end would have been a post-credit teaser for the next movie.
Yeah, because I was curious about that too. Because if that was in the movie, because the angel's not in the script, so
right. She's sitting on Cooper's lap.
Yeah, she's sitting in Cooper's lap instead, but that takes place after the post
the Annie scene,
final episode stuff, after the post season 2 stuff.
Right.
Which also leads into my theory that you mentioned about that scene being the end of Twin Peaks. And part of the reason I think that's the end of Twin Peaks is that I think whatever, Cooper's doing here with Carrie Page, which I believe is to bring her in front of Judy, because I think she's a neutralizing force of Judy. That she will either destroy Judy or contain her out of our world, essentially. And that's why she was created in that golden orb. So I think that eventually Cooper's stuck in a loop, as we see from Philip Jeffries, doing the same thing, stuck in the same loop, can't remember Richard and Linda. Same thing's happening. I think eventually when they do defeat evil, because we know that David Lynch does like to have evil defeated in the end. When that happens,
he likes happy endings.
He likes happy endings. So I think that when that happens, that Laura and Cooper essentially will sacrifice himself. Laura, in her own way, is kind of already dead. So I think that both of them are in the Black Lodge, and then they see that angel, and that angel may be coming for both of them, and that's kind of the end. Now, as to why Cooper's younger, he's jumping back and forth through time. Who knows? Laura Palmer, I think they were making her up to look older, which would fit more with Carrie Page.
So when she screams at the end, right, and everything goes out, the power goes out. I know it's, especially with the music, it's very dark, it's very gloomy. But there's this other part of me that says her bursting out the electricity is almost letting you know that this may be a dark moment for both of them, but it is going to be okay in the end, because her voice can take out the electricity, which is their power.
It's their traveling. It's how they travel, it seems, too, through this electricity. They seem to travel through it quite a bit.
Right.
I mean, even Cooper, to get in and out of the lodge is, when he goes out of the lodge, he's coming through an electrical socket. So it seems to really be a means of travel for lodge spirits. So she takes out this power. So I think that basically she'll do something like that, and they will defeat this evil. But at the same point, they won't be able to go back to the world. That they've essentially also sacrificed themselves, hence them being in the lodge and seeing the angel. That's kind of why that's my theory, that is the end of everything that we're seeing there.
They're sort of the king and queen of the Black Lodge.
Essentially, yeah. Kind of, yeah. But, the angel appearing suggests they're not going to be trapped there, or there is no more Black Lodge, because they've all been, vanquished back to wherever they came, the other world from which they came, Or the other place.
I remember seeing the ending of Fire Walk with Me and thinking, wow, that's so bittersweet that they're in this. Again, I was taking it as like if this was the end of the movie or the series, because obviously there wasn't going to be anything else after that until season 3. But I thought, how bittersweet to have them stuck in this sort of hell world and be at peace while the rest of the world's going to hell because Mr. C is out there. Right?
Yeah.
And it has to be so bad that even Annie is willing to travel back in time to warn Laura Palmer.
Exactly. Which brings up another point too about that, is that I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought again. This
yeah.
Okay. You were talking about going back in time and the lodge and the ending and the angel.
Were you excited though when season 3, when they took the owl symbol and turned it into the infinite symbol?
Oh yeah, very.
Yeah, I have a feeling like it was always meant to be that it wasn't, because otherwise it just wasn't going to connect that well.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah,
I think it was designed that way. I definitely do, and a lot of people made a lot of thing about an issue out of the extra line that's on the Owl Cave symbol on the ring and Fire Walk with Me. That
Right.
and in general on the ring. And I don't think that extra line has any extra meaning other than just showing the right way to wear the ring. It's like, when they have
Thank you for that. That actually makes sense.
It's like when they have the 6 ball and the 9 ball and they put the under and pull and they put the line under so you know which one is which.
Right.
Same kind of thing. Because we know that symbol means something different the other way. Wyndham Earl inverts the symbol. So the ring, having that line under there is just telling you which way to wear the ring.
Okay, I can't be the only one whose mind is being blown right now because like what you're saying is so obvious, and yet I never thought about it. So thank you.
That's kind of been my theory on it for a while. Is that that's
I think you're correct because I mean you've hung around with David Lynch. I think you know the way he thinks.
Well, I have a theory about the way he thinks. Obviously, yes, I've been around David Lynch, but he's never said like he never does to anybody.
Right. No, but I'm saying like once you get onto that wavelength, you kind of through osmosis, you kind of get it.
Kind of. I think I feel that I have a pretty good idea of how his mind works. I can't say for sure. Nobody does.
Okay, so let me ask you.
I feel I have a pretty good idea.
All right. Well, it's 10:40. I know you said you needed to go soon, but if there's a couple more questions I can sneak in before you go. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
We'll give another 10 minutes or so if everybody wants that.
Oh my goodness. Okay. But don't worry, Josh is coming back, guys.
I'm not going back.
Yeah, this isn't like the end all.
Believe me, there are a lot of hours we could do in a deep dive of everything of Twin Peaks and all of David Lynch's films. There is a lot of ground to cover.
And we did, yes, and we intend to cover it, and we're also going to at some point tackle Mulholland Drive, and it's going to be awesome because I
got some behind the scenes stories on that one too.
Yeah, I bet you do, and I have a theory about Mulholland Drive that I'll send to you.
Nice.
And curious about what you think about that. Okay. Since you've been around David Lynch, I just have to ask you, what is your vibe? Do you think he truly, truly loves Twin Peaks and its world like the way he says it? Or do you think it's been sort of a curse on him in some aspects? How do you think
he's changed
it?
I think there's parts of it that he always loves, but I think there's certain parts during season 2 that he has more of a negative feeling about, and it's not really because of the material as much as it is what he went through with the network, because they were not behind him. They forced him to do things he didn't want to do. He had to basically fight them every step of the way.
Well, then why do On the Air with them?
I think, in a way, if you look at On the Air, it's kind of making fun of them.
It is. So then why go back with Mulholland Drive?
They convinced them. Tony Krantz's agent came in and convinced them. And he was kind of saying, nope, I'm never doing TV again. And Tony Krantz came in. I think the conversation, from what I understand, it went something like that. David Lynch said, okay, I'll do it only if I can bring up as many mysteries as I want, and I don't have to be forced to solve any one of them. And that was agreed to. And when that was agreed to, he did it. However, the one catch is that they could say, we're not going to air it at all, which is what they ended up doing.
Okay, so I've seen that pilot of Mulholland Drive, and it's not totally dissimilar from what the first 90 minutes of the movie is.
Yeah, it's pretty similar.
I don't understand how you watch that pilot and say, we're not going to air this. I understand it was rough. I understand, but it's still like Mulholland Drive, right?
Yeah, and that pilot that got leaked is not a finished, it's not a finished cut. So, it's I think, the pilot.
But the genesis of it is there. I mean, the actors
if it was
are great.
Completed, and if it was completed, it would have played, like the first 90 minutes of the film probably. And I don't know how he would watch that and not be so excited to see what was going to happen next. I mean, I agree with you. It's amazing. I mean, if that had been a series in an alternate universe, like you were saying, what we would have had, I mean, who knows?
22 episodes of Mulholland Drive.
I mean, wow. Could you imagine? But it would have been better on HBO or Showtime or something like that, where he wouldn't have censorship and wouldn't have to make it, exactly 44 or 47 minutes,
I just love the fact that like you watch the movie and it's like 90 minutes of like, basically there's some changes here and there, but it's basically the ABC pilot. And then the moment the pilot ends, it gets violent. They start cussing and there's lesbianism. So
yeah, immediately.
Yeah.
Immediately you don't have to wear that in the house. What? The wig.
Okay. Can you give us any backstory as to? I mean, we heard that Mark Frost wanted to take the series further with the first movie, and Lynch wanted to go back and do the prequel.
Yeah.
Is that the only reason why they just, I mean, I can't imagine, they worked together from like 87 to like 92. That one conversation made them split?
You know, I don't know for a fact what made them split. I really don't.
Right.
But if I was going to speculate, I would say that might have been the nail in the coffin. I think that maybe the final episode of season 2 might have been the first thing, because as we all know, they had the script that we all know about,
right,
with the dentist office and all of that. And David Lynch thankfully came in and did what he did.
right.
Because
And
that
can
episode
I
was a
say,
masterpiece.
thankfully, he also cut out Windham Earl trying to assault Annie in the truck,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
that is
Yeah.
Windham Earl wouldn't stoop that low.
No, he would not. It would be totally out of character. Yeah, I think what David Lynch did with Windham Earl in there was fantastic. I mean, he really,
When he does the flashlight, I am Windham Earl. I love it. I eat it all up.
Yep.
And at the moment where he grabs Heather Graham and slams her into the window, if you watch her facial expression, she hits that window. She goes, ow, like that.
Yeah. Take a look at that. 12 rainbow trout.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love what David Lynch did with Windham Earl in that final episode. It just, and that whole scene, because he really is a master at sometimes less being more. And
right.
There was, I know I recently said something about this because somebody was talking somewhere about Ingrid Bucato, who played the curious woman in Fire Walk with Me, the one with the,
right,
that we were just talking about. That
and people thought was David Lynch for some reason for years.
Right, it wasn't. And I posted about this because in 1998, I had found somehow, I don't remember how, I think it was somebody that went to the festival. It told me that they knew how to find her, had a number for her, and I ended up on the phone with her. I believe it was the 98 festival, because we had the dinner at the Kiana Lodge, which was the Blue Pine Lodge in the show, and where Laura Palmer's log is and all of that.
Right.
So I called her, and she was very nice. I had about a 30-minute conversation with her on the phone, and she was going to try to come to the festival, and then she didn't make it. And when I asked, and I did do one follow-up call to ask if she was okay, why she didn't make it, she just said that she had got stuck in Bainbridge Island traffic to get to the ferry boat to get Bainbridge Island, which is why we didn't have her there, in which case there'd be pictures and everything else. But one thing she told me, she said that the direction David Lynch gave her when she walked into the trailer is, remember, less is more. I remember her telling me that. And I think that that's kind of a rule that David Lynch lives by a lot. And with Windham Earl in the final episode of season 2, we see that, where in the script, he had all these lines, about Caroline and all of that. But David Lynch just kind of cut it down to the essentials. And it actually made it scarier and creepier. Windham Earl became that. Yeah.
It's great with Annie with the bug eyes and stuff. I love it. And the thing that's always so amazed me is that shot of Windham Earl bringing Annie in with the drapes, right? And then also the Cooper one with the drapes from the season 2 finale. That looks better than the red drapes in the movie and season 3.
Yeah, it does.
I don't know what it is, but it almost feels like they really took their time with that process shot, and the other one just felt like, I mean, Fire Walk Me just feels like it's just superimposed big, I love just the ease that the red drapes appear in the second season finale.
And that whole moment too, where Annie gets hypnotized. And again, that's another, like you were talking about with Chet Desmon in Fire Walk with Me, Annie is also hypnotized. We see this a lot, actually. Somebody getting hypnotized by something from the lodge. Annie's hypnotized when Windham Earl holds the flashlight up to her and says, "You will not run from me now, not in the circle of trees. You will come with me."
Right.
And then if we go to season 3, part 16, Bushnell Mullins, before Cooper wakes up, he hears that same sound coming from the boiler room of the Great Northern that Ben Horn and Beverly hear. And he gets hypnotized and leaves the room right before Cooper wakes up and talks to Mike.
Right.
Which is interesting because I think that sound is obviously Mike. The same way the arm has a sound, and then the evolution of the arm has a sound, that sound is Mike. I say that because Mike is waiting behind the door in the boiler room, and when Bushnell Mullins leaves because of that sound, Mike is there when Cooper wakes up. So it is like some of these lodge spirits can hypnotize people, which is interesting, going back to what you said about Chet Desmon, which could lead into a very unsolved mystery of what happened to Chet Desmond, which is a whole other can of worms.
Well, I think that obviously they didn't have the technology to do this, but I think if they could go back, the moment he grabs the ring, I think that he flies back sort of like the Tulpas,
right.
Which then gets in the idea, like the Blade Runner, was Chet Desmond himself a Tulpa?
Exactly. And if Chet Desmond was a Tulpa, then the implication would be, too, that he would put the ring on, and maybe, now Tulpas disappear when they die. We know that from the Lois Duffy story. We know it from Diane's Tulpa and Dougie Jones's Tulpa. So the question is, did somebody maybe kill Chet and then he disappeared with the ring on, hence being sent away to the lodge. And then whoever killed him writes, "Let's rock" on the car. And that was a Chet tulpa. And then the real Chet is stuck in the lodge somewhere, like, Diane was, maybe in another body.
So when Chris Isaac told me that they had contacted him to be in season 3 and he was sick and he couldn't do it, that lends credence to the idea of him being in the lodge, even for just a moment or two. Yeah. If Cooper would have seen Chet Desmon in the lodge, that would have made
maybe the real Chet. And then because the other tulpa, if the Chet we see in Fire Walk with Me is a tulpa, then he just would have been a little golden seed also. And that the real Chet would be trapped in the lodge the entire time, which actually could make sense. They got to Chet they created a tulpa, got a tulpa in the Blue Rose Task Force. I never really thought about this before, but this is interesting.
I do think that I think the Black Lodge wants to know, especially since Wyndham Earle was investigating the Doug puzzle and stuff, I think they want to know, what do these guys know about us? So maybe if they did get one on into the Blue Rose Task Force, they would have an idea, because they really want Cooper, and they know,
right.
Obviously it was supposed to be Cooper and Sam Stanley, but since they had to change it for Chet Desmon, it makes sense. Get rid of Chet, that brings Cooper into town, right?
Right. And then Wyndham Earle, the ironic thing about Wyndham Earle is that it seems to me like he's almost being used by the lodge like a pawn. There's the chess metaphor again. That Wyndham Earle thinks he's the king, but he's actually a pawn being maneuvered by the lodge to get Cooper into the lodge.
Right. And and then they finally got a hold of Mr. C, and he's creating like Time Bandit boxes in like New York, and and like of course the theory of him going down to Brazil and taking out John Justice Wheeler.
I like that theory.
And then so then that would explain if he had his way with Audrey and then stuck her in a room in like one of the lodges or above the convenience store, like the way the tulpa Diane says, then she would be sort of inversed from what's going on in reality. Therefore, John Justice Wheeler would be Billy Zane, and she would be screaming about Billy. Where's Billy? Where's Billy?
Interesting. Yeah. Very interesting.
But you had a theory about Billy, right? Didn't you?
I do. But do you want to?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, I'm not saying this is true, but that is a very interesting theory. That would make sense. Because one thing I did wonder about it is John Justice Wheeler, the person that we saw, likely the second he heard Audrey was in that bank, would have made sure to get back to be with her, especially when he found out she was pregnant. He would have assumed that was his child.
Right.
If John Justice Wheeler is at all a decent person, he finds out that Audrey's pregnant with his, he's going to, and was in an explosion, he's going to make sure he's over there. But he wasn't, which lends credence to your theory, which I like, that Mr. C went over there and
it's not my theory. I've heard about it online, and when I heard it, I thought that is brilliant, because that makes sense why he went straight to Brazil, Buenos Aires, all that stuff ties in.
I don't look at that much online stuff, so I wasn't aware of that, but it's an interesting theory.
It's one that I now 100% buy into.
So. Yeah, and it makes sense, because I always wondered, why wouldn't John Justice Wheeler, and I know it wouldn't have been in season 3, but it probably would have been in Mark Frost's book. It would have been the final dossier if he had come back.
So I'm just going to go through a couple quick questions. One is, since Wyndham Earle's not name dropped at all in Fire Walk with Me or in season 3, why is there an immense Wyndham Earle presence in season 3? Because he's inside Bob took his soul, and Bob's in Mr. C, so therefore there's little Wyndham Earle edges coming out. Is that?
Yes, I think so. I think there's definitely Wyndham Earle edges, and this gets into another thing that I kind of wanted to discuss at some point, which is the bonsai tree.
Right.
That's by Sam Colby in the glass box room in New York, and which also lends credence to that. Now, also, I would say that if Mr. C has memories of Cooper and memories of Wyndham Earle, he would only just need memories of Cooper to do this. That he would remember the bonsai tree and very likely bug the bonsai tree. And when it comes to the issue of Tracy, it's very likely that Tracy herself was also hired by Mr. C, and she was hired by Mr. C to seduce Sam, sleep with Sam, in order to manifest Jowday, the experiment, in the glass box, because that's what he wants.
Well, if fear and love opened the door, that was not love, that was lust.
That was lust, but he still is. But we know also, if you read, the Secret History, the whole bit about the sex magic,
right?
Which
doesn't that have to be two willingly partners that know what they're doing, or is it just
maybe not? Because I think that's what Cooper and Diane are doing in part 18.
Right. Of course.
So I think, but Tracy may have gone in knowing that she was I don't think she knew that this thing was going to come out and just kill him, obviously.
Well,
but
she wouldn't scream like that if so.
Yeah. I don't think she had any idea, but I think she was hired to do that. And I think that the guard was told by Mr. C, leave, in order to allow this to happen. And the bond said she was there so he could hear everything. And then, of course, he gets the call with the I missed you in New York, but I see you're still in Buckhorn, which I still believe is that entity, the experiment Jaudet, calling and taunting him.
The one that calls him in the motel.
The one that pretends to be Philip Jeffries.
Okay. That bonsai tree being there now makes... I was always wondering, like, why would the Wyndham Earl part of Mr. C put a bonsai tree? I thought maybe for decoration. You're right, though. He would want to eavesdrop. He's
sending Tracy in there. He wants to hear what she's doing, what they're doing. He'd want to eavesdrop on all of it. If anybody's breaking the rules and bringing anybody else in, he wants to hear it all. He's got the cameras. Now he's got the bug.
Okay.
That brings Wyndham Earl into the story there, too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm trying to think of anything Fire Walk With Me related since it is the anniversary. Can we just give a shout out? Angelo Badalamenti's music is phenomenal in Fire Walk With Me. I mean, he's always been great with Lynch.
He's amazing. Master.
He's absolutely just incredible. But Fire Walk With Me is so diverse in the type. It goes from, again, there's the jazzy music. There's the rap music, Real Indication, all that. The whole Black Dog Runs at Night thing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, how does that tie into it? Because like there's these shots that are not in the script of like the dog barking and stuff like that during the Thread Will Be Torn scene. Like,
Animal Life.
Right, but the dog doesn't come back in any other incarnation of Twin Peaks. No. So it's like, what is going on here? Is it just the dog? Life?
The dog, I think dogs. That's something that's in every David Lynch film. We either see a dog or have a reference of a dog in every David Lynch film. That's one motif that is constant.
Right.
And it's not pointed out a lot, but it's there. In every one of them.
But these close-ups of like this omen dog like barking and then it fading to white and all that.
And I think that you notice that happens when Mike is screaming at Leland. So I think, and Leland's kind of clammed up and his face is contorted and he's angry and he's, stepping on the gas and the brake at the same time and trying to make noise so Laura Palmer can't hear. And I think the dog at that point is kind of what Leland is going, the inner Leland, the inner Bob, just going,
Yes, but you also said energy. But you also said something, I don't know if you said it last show or offline, but you said that Leland was revving the engine to disguise the burnt engine oil sound or smell. Is that what you're thinking?
Two things, to disguise the noise and to disguise the smell, because Laura Palmer notices the smell. So if he does that and he can create a smell, it's a dual purpose.
So he's cranking it so that Laura thinks the smell is coming from the car, not him.
Exactly. And he's cranking it to try to drown out Mike. And that's why he screams, when Mike is at the end about to say, it's your father. He's I gotta tell you,
when I first got the script, I remember reading that scene going, oh, I finally understand what Mike was saying, because I couldn't understand it in the theater, and when I could read the lines, I was like, oh my God, that makes even more sense.
Yeah. So, which suggests that stealing Garmonbozia cans led to an issue.
Right.
Above the convenience store. And of course, sorry, what's up?
And we should touch on, even if we touch on briefly, the rumors are true about why Richard Beamer was not involved with the film. Everyone kind of had heard that it was just about the scene of him like trading drugs for a kiss, right? That's pretty much it. Mm-hmm. He didn't like that at all, so he was just like, I'm out.
Yeah, he didn't like the kind of the Ben Horn drug dealer idea.
Which I understand, but I also think that's an easy fix that Lynch and Ingalls could have gone around and still had Ben Horn in the film. Maybe he was just thinking, well, Audrey's not in the film, so maybe Ben doesn't have to be in the film.
Yeah, he might have just thought, okay, forget about the horns, That might have been something like that.
Right. Let's just name drop them in scenes we're going to eventually cut out.
Right.
But I would have loved to have seen Laura with Johnny and all that.
Yeah.
I think, that's what I'm talking about. Those little scenes would have balanced out the,
Well, we get the reference. Don't forget, it's Johnny Horn's birthday in The Missing Pieces. We get the name drop of Johnny Horn right there. So,
but it's in The Missing Pieces, not in the theatrical cut.
Right. Yeah, only in and then she tells Dr. Jacoby that she couldn't see him because it was Johnny Horn's birthday.
Okay. Let me throw out one more thing.
Okay.
Questions in a World of Blue. Mm-hmm. That music is so close to Audrey's prayer.
Very close.
right? And because it was used with Audrey's Prayer, it also was used with Cooper and Annie, right? That I
and
think,
Audrey and John Justice Wheeler too.
Right. But I almost think that because we get the Annie reference in the bed, I'm almost thinking it's another way that the good forces are trying to reach Laura by coming through the music.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yes, that very well could be. Yeah.
Because when I first heard that on the soundtrack, I remember going, "This is the most beautiful song," I gotta say. But because it was using a lot of Audrey's Prayer as sort of the template of it, it really kind of connects emotionally all the other couples of the show.
Absolutely, and it almost becomes like at the end of season 2, it almost becomes like a love theme in a way.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Which fits in with also making Laura Palmer cry when she hears Questions of the Will of Blue, which goes back to that idea I was talking earlier about what David Lynch does, where people have this feeling that comes over them, where they feel something in the air and they react to it.
Right. One other disappointment I have with Fire Walk with Me, real quick, is the since we're in Canada already, I wish we would have seen Blackie throw Ronette and Laura out of One Eye Jacks, as opposed to just hearing about it in a subtitled line. I mean, we're already in Canada, for God's sakes, right? Sometimes show don't tell. I would love to have seen Blackie get your stuff, get out of here. You know what I mean?
Right. Because the theme, like the way that it's written in the diary, sort of, that kind of like see that come to life, because it's interesting the way it's written in the diary. It's if you remember that bit in Laura Palmer's diary that describes it. It would have been a pretty wild scene had that been filmed the way it was written in the diary, that's for sure.
When I interviewed Jennifer Lynch, I asked her, I said, when he was making Fire Walk with Me, did you think that he was going to adapt your diary? And she said, Cameron, my dad's never read my diary.
Wow.
That's what she said. That's a quote. So
wow. Okay. Well,
I don't know if I believe that or not. I think that there's no way it would have passed even publication because apparently what Jennifer said is that a couple of the pages were, written down to be as this page was ripped because she got a little too close to what.
Yeah, she told me that he did actually. Jennifer's told me in the past that he did actually go through and say, okay, this one's out, that one's out, that one's out, and pick kind of the ripped out pages.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. I don't believe that he didn't. Maybe he didn't read it cover to cover, but I think that he was like, "What about this?"
He might not. He probably didn't read it cover to cover, but she might have just said, "Okay, this has happened here, that's happened here," and he might have said, "Okay, make this one a ripped out page, make that a ripped out page." It might have been her describing to him, "Here's what it is," and then he said, "Okay, this one, this one, this one."
Well, if you can't get enough of Laura Palmer, get yourself the audio version of the diary, which
that's great.
It is. I mean, I remember hearing about them planning on doing it when it came out. It's so incredible. It's just so incredible.
It is. It's definitely worth listening to.
All right. So 30 years later, Fire Walk with Me. Do you love it more now than you did at the time?
Yes. I would say yes, because especially after season 3.
Right.
I mean, I've always loved Fire Walk with Me.
I got to tell you, when they put the ring on Ray when he was dying and then he showed up in the lodge, that was like the moment where I went, oh, now I understand the ring.
Yep, exactly. And it also explains the don't take the ring. And then, of course, it brings up another interesting question for Fire Walk with Me. I mean, I'm going to open up another can of worms here, but we can talk about this another point, but I'll throw it out there. Why does Mike throw the ring into Laura Palmer? Because putting that ring on is what clearly gets her trapped in the lodge. That's why she's in the lodge.
Okay, pause there. Okay. 2 quick things. Is her putting on the ring, was that an insert shot done after the fact?
Probably.
Or was that in the script? Her putting
on the ring? It's in the script. It's in the script, but it probably was an insert shot later just because it's a close up on the hand. They usually, do those later in film.
Then what do you know about this? I heard when a film played at Cannes Film Festival, there was no Requiem music when Leland was killing her, and it was just sound effects. Do you know anything about that? I have not heard that.
Okay. I have not heard that. Yeah, I'm not sure. I've not heard that.
And I know that the Cannes cut was supposed to be what we got, but there is in one of the retrospective programs for Cannes Film Festival, it puts the film at 150 minutes, which I always thought was interesting. So
then that makes you wonder. I mean, I don't know if that's the case, but it would make you wonder what those what that extra time would be, which scenes were there, you know?
Exactly. Well, I do hope that one day we do get the full version of the film. I think it's, I mean, if people can sit through 5 hours of Return of the King, I'll sit through 5 hours of Fire Walk with Me.
Oh yeah, easily. I'd sit
Yeah.
through a 10-hour Fire Walk with Me. I'd camp out here right now, say forget everything, all my plans tomorrow. I'm just going to camp out here, watch the 10-hour Fire Walk with Me. Wonderful.
I always
Bring
liked
it on.
I always liked the film. I loved aspects of the film. I felt that sometimes, especially coming after Blue Velvet and Wild at Heart, those felt like very cinematic movies. And Fire
Mhm.
Walk with Me feels very much like Twin Peaks. It feels like, because it's filmed at 185 as opposed to the 235, it
Yeah.
always kind of felt, I don't want to say TV movie, but I mean, it feels more in line with the show
Right.
format.
And it goes right into season 3 very nicely
Right.
with
That's what I'm saying.
aspect ratio.
But
Yeah.
I always liked the film. I had a few little hiccups in there with like the James call and all that kind of stuff, but I feel like we've talked it through that. I feel really comfortable with it now. But then when I
Yeah,
saw,
I like your theory on that. That really makes it work a lot better. That it was Leland and in her drugged out state, she thought it was James. I like that because that.
but it only works. It only works with the missing piece in there.
Right.
It doesn't
But
work
knowing
if
that the
Leland's
missing
home.
pieces were intended, it makes it work. You know,
Exactly.
or originally intended to be in.
When I saw the missing pieces, I remember thinking, a lot of times I see deleted scenes. I remember even talking to Jennifer Lynch about this. She goes, when you see them, you're going to know why they were cut. Okay. I'm sitting there watching them going, I know why some of these were cut.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why all of these were cut, except for the 2 hour and 15 minutes.
It's like most films, you get a DVD, you watch the deleted scenes, and you're thinking, okay, I see why that wasn't there. Okay, it's interesting, but it's not. But a David Lynch deleted scene, like all of them that have been released, Blue Velvet, Wild at Heart, Fire Walk with Me, they're amazing. I mean, it's it's unusual for deleted scenes to be that good.
And because they were so cleaned up, they didn't feel like deleted scenes. They felt like
yeah.
I can't even imagine what it was like being at the premiere watching those. I mean,
incredible, mind blown, incredible.
Was there one in particular that you saw where you just like?
Oh, the first one that I remember. I was, like you said, it was with my mouth open the entire time. But the convenience store scene and the Philip Jeffries stuff. I remember the Buenos Aires Philip Jeffries in the convenience store when those came out, because those are pretty early.
Right.
Those two just blew my mind. And I have another David Lynch story at the end of the movie. So the premiere, it ends. I'm standing up. I was kind of near the end. I'm walking to the end of the aisle where I'm sitting. And I look over and David Lynch is walking past. And I thought, okay, I've got to say something. I've got to do it. So I stopped and I said to him, I turned around and I said, Mr. Lynch, I got to tell you, this was amazing. You just blew my mind yet again. And he stuck out his hand to shake my hand and said, coming from you, Josh, that means a lot. Which was a very short exchange, but it was incredible.
Well, considering that you blew his mind, the fact that you remembered all the trivia from on the Mulholland Drive,
and the fact that he, remembered my name and everything, it'd been a long time since the last time I'd seen before that was at an art show that he did in Santa Monica. It had been a long time. So the fact that I still made enough impression that he remembered me and all of that, and it was nice to be able to see it and then directly tell him how amazing it was kind of a.
Well, I think also because you've worked with people who have worked with him. I mean, your name definitely is known.
Yeah. I think he's probably heard it more than once.
Exactly. So, like I said, I really liked the film. Then when I saw the missing pieces, and then when I saw them all put together and saw basically, again, we know that there's still stuff missing, but basically what this is closer to the version that he was planning to release, that he'd wanted to release, right? So when you see it and you go, okay, this is much closer to the Twin Peaks movie that I wanted to see in 1992. Not that I was disappointed in what I saw. I was more disappointed in what we didn't get to see. But now that I have it in this, it's like awesome.
I would not have minded sitting in the theater watching a 3.5 hour movie, by the way, back then either. I would have been totally fine with it.
Absolutely.
But I don't think the theaters don't like that, because they like to have the turnover, every 90 minutes to 2 hours.
Yeah, but remember we talked about how there was even rumors back then that he was going to put everything back for the VHS release.
Yep. Out of the Laserdisc, the Japanese Laserdisc rumor and all of that.
Yeah, because the film, back then it took like 14 months or so for a movie to come out to VHS, and in that movie was out by late January of '93. It was like a 4-month turnaround. It was so fast. Just got to say, we've had about 30 people watching us. They're loving this conversation. They're loving our
wonderful.
conversations. Christian says, I could watch Firewalk Me for 10 hours and I could listen to you guys discussing the show for that amount of time easily.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, don't worry. This is the start of many, many conversations. And we got the game show coming up, Josh.
Oh, yes.
We don't have a date yet, but we're planning. I already got one contestant ready to go. I need 6 more. And this is going to be fun, guys. This is going to be really
Well, I'm going
fun.
to end this with a very difficult question, and I'll throw this out to anybody in the comments.
Okay.
Okay. This is a really tough missing pieces Firewalk with Me question, and I'm asking it because we're talking about Firewalk with Me.
Right. Don't Google it.
Yeah, no Googling. That's why I'll say give it to me within 20 seconds of me asking the question. Okay. How many miles did Sam Stanley say that it was that he, in the missing pieces, Sam Stanley says how many miles he drove when he drove the body back to Portland from Deer Meadow? How many miles was it? He tells Cooper how many miles it was.
If this was me, I'd be already out of the game.
This is a super difficult. This is beyond level 3.
Okay.
This is a super difficult category. This is mega plus level 3. But it's interesting because I drove up to Washington in 2019, and I when I was hit Portland, I clocked to this mileage.
Mm-hmm.
Has it been more than? I can't see the comments right. Is anybody?
Okay, here we go. No clue. That's my answer. No clue.
105 miles.
Christian says 253.
105 miles.
105.
So I clocked to that and drove up from Portland, and I figured that would be where Deer Meadow was.
Okay.
And I believe it was what was the name of the town? It started with a C. It was 105 miles north of Portland. And it is kind of Southwest Washington, that area. And I figured that was probably, and I know some people, I've never done it.
Isn't it supposed to be closer to the southern part of the state?
It is supposed to be the southwest corner of the state. 105 miles. Portland is very close to Washington.
Right.
So 105 miles, it's southwest, I guess, but it's, a little bit northern.
Okay. Christian says, yeah, that was a tough one.
That's
what I'm saying.
Okay. I'll do the one that, do you remember two nights ago when we did it, I had a question and I got that brain fog thing again, and I didn't remember what the question was that I had. I remember what it was going to be. It's a season 3 question.
Okay.
And it's a 2-parter, and it has to do when Mr. C goes to the farm. What is the name of the boss of the farm? Throwing this out to everyone in the comments. The name of the boss of the farm who does the arm wrestling, and the name of the guy that works for the boss that explains the rules of the arm wrestling. Those 2 characters' names.
Okay, so the one guy is from Wild at Heart, right?
Yes, he is.
And then the other one is the one that played Jason in the Friday the 13th remake.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, those are
Yeah.
I don't know their names, but we'll see if anyone in the chat knows. And what did you think of that? While they're waiting, because it takes them a minute or two to catch up. What did you think of that whole arm wrestling scene in season 3?
That was pretty wild. I mean, the first time watching it, I had no idea what was going to happen. I just remember when Mr. C is going up that elevator the first time, it's just being extremely tense.
Right.
Watching that the first time when he's going up that elevator, and Ray takes out the gun, and I almost just said his name. Says to Cooper, and he says to Ray, "Put the gun down, Ray." Has anybody?
Nobody's answered it yet.
Okay, I will give the answer because it's given everybody time to Google. Renzo and Muddy. Renzo's the boss. Renzo's the boss. Who's played by Derek Mears, who's the guy that played Jason that you were mentioning. Right. And Muddy is played by Frank Collison, who played Timmy Thompson in Wild at Heart, the manager of the Iguana Motel, that talks about the car accident with Robert Brenton. So he's Muddy, and the boss is Renzo.
Oh my God, that whole scene in Big Tuna, Texas, is one of the greatest scenes in cinema history because those 2 guys,
Buddy and Sparky.
Yeah, well, the guy fishing with John.
Buddy and Sparky are the characters' names.
Right.
John Lurie and Pruitt Taylor Vince.
Right. Those 2 guys, whoever gave them I know it was David Lynch, but I'm saying whoever gave them the idea that you're stuck in this town too, and yet you're just like laughing your butts off because you're in a stupid town. And the fact that they're just sitting there just laughing their butts off because they know this whole place is absurd.
Interesting thing about that. Now, I've seen a behind the scenes thing, and I think this was in the 90s that this aired somewhere, and I remember seeing it, where you see David Lynch give them some direction about the laughing. And he's telling them, to laugh all these times. And then he says to them, when you laugh like you're putting it on Sailor, like there's a joke you have on him.
Oh, okay.
Which is interesting. So, and because when you see it with that in mind, you can kind of see when they keep laughing that Sailor's getting kind of increasingly uncomfortable by it. Like there is some kind of inside joke that he's not aware of because they're laughing at everything.
Right.
And even when Jack Nance, Bosie Spool comes over and he's telling his thing about his dog barking some and they're laughing.
Let me tell you something. When Jack Nance does the bark, the whole theater jumped.
Yeah.
Because the sound in that movie is so fantastic. But like even when he barks, I remember the whole theater went like it was like a horror movie, right? And then when that guy comes in, does that magic trick with the smoke, love it.
Yep,
love it.
That's just such a great little touch. The guy comes in, does that flame right, puts that flame up right in front of him. Yeah,
I love it. I love it so much. Wild at Heart gets very little love out there in the Lynch community, but I love that movie.
I do too.
So much as it's probably my top 20 of all time. It's just
in fact, I'm doing a screening of it over at my place on Thursday. I'm doing a movie night with Wild at Heart Thursday, so perfectly fitting.
Wow. So Christian in the chat says the time of the autopsy of Teresa Banks. It's interesting in relation to season 3.
Yes, it is.
I'm pretty sure that was taken from Fire Walk with Me to use in season 3. I don't
probably
think it's a coincidence.
So, yeah.
I don't think it's a coincidence. So
it's got to be because also fourth, when you look at those numbers, them adding to 7, David Lynch, something where he adds numbers up to something.
Right.
Which is like,
well, he's rolling numbers. He's rolling numbers every day in his house.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
Josh,
10 being the number of completion and 7 being a good number, anything that adds to 7. So 430 would be considered a good number.
True. Okay. On that note, I'm going to let you go because I know you need to get going. I've kept you far longer. But anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I can't wait for our next video. These videos are like making me fall in love with Twin Peaks all over again. I love it.
I'm glad to hear that. If I can do anything, if I can help everybody fall in love with Twin Peaks all over again, wonderful. If I can help it contribute in any way, anything that, brings Twin Peaks to life and gets more people interested in David Lynch's films and gets more people into that, the better for all of us. And yeah.
Well, it's like, but you're like, we're all Lynch fans and you're presenting this information in a way that's making us like, it's kind of like when you show your favorite movie to somebody who's never seen it before, and with those fresh eyes, all of a sudden you love it more again.
Yeah, I love that. I love doing that so much. It's like you get to watch it for the first time.
Well, you're doing that for all of us. So
thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
And one of these days, I'd love to just get your full insights into Queen of Hearts and what you took away from it.
Absolutely.
So
I absolutely.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel. Subscribe to actually all my channels here. Pop Culture again as well on YouTube. Really appreciate it. Let us know in the comments what you thought of these conversations, and we will see you soon. Have a wonderful night. Take it easy.
Absolutely. Good night, everybody. Thanks for